Modern collecting of retro gaming can be quite expensive, and as someone who constantly seeks to find these pieces of gaming history, it can carry quite a price. Even with my budget, there's some occasions where I can't afford games because they are either incredibly expensive or for less I can afford many more games for a console of my choice. But talking about price points, it can be weird because the market is dynamic, and I feel the only way to really cover this topic is to create 3 different episodes, one focusing on expensive games that are practical to buy, expensive games that are impractical to buy, and ones that are so rare you'll likely never see them in person. Today, I'm going to cover the ones that I consider impractical, games that from a collection perspective really just don't make sense to buy unless you want something unique. I will say for the Nintendo 64, many of the rarer games are not for resale versions, and I know in the previous video folks didn't like that they were present, but I don't make the rules for the collection economy. I might consider making a separate episode that omits not for resale, but I do find them important to mention. With that being said, let's begin. When Ocarina of Time came out, my world changed, literally. I was inside of a world that I could explore, with people I could talk to, quests to solve. I didn't really mind the brainless backtracking and the fetch quests because as a kid, this was the shit. That was what we were programmed to do, to seek the end of the game, and I beat it. I remember one day I was looking at the Christmas sale magazine for Walmart. If you're old enough to remember the Walmart catalog, and really any catalog of the era, video games were on the last page, and that's where I saw Majora's Mask. Another Zelda on the Nintendo 64? Sign me up. It wasn't long before I realized that I really didn't like this game. But as an adult, I appreciated the storytelling and the relevance to the stages of grief. It's a very dark and deep game. Now, normally this isn't that expensive, but we have a combination that changes the game, literally. From what I remember, the original run of Majora's Mask was a gold cart, and it's kind of common. The version I had, however, had a lenticular cover on the front that looked cool if you moved it right to left. Apparently, Dad bought me the collector's edition, and I didn't even realize it. But there are 2 more rare versions of this game, but the only one I'll be talking about today is the gold not for resale version. It's literally the same game, and you're looking at about $320 if you want it. Ever heard of Boss Studios? They made a few promising Nintendo 64 games, Top Gear Rally, World Driver Championship, the one that I knew personally was Twisted Edge Snowboarding. But they made one game that is expensive for one very specific reason, and that reason is the game was never commercially sold. You would never find this on the shelf at Toys R Us, Walmart, Babbage's, Funcoland. There was only one shelf you could find it on, and that was Blockbuster. This is a Blockbuster exclusive, and it's one that came out fairly late in the Nintendo 64's lifespan. After all, the last game was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, released in 2002, and by then, the GameCube was already out. So there's a reason why you'll have to crank out $320 if you're lucky to buy this game. It's not even really that great either. The whole premise is that you take cars from the past and they retrofitted them into these like ultra hot rods, which is cool, I guess. But you can only drive 4 different cars, so to me this is a very basic ass racing game. Oh boy, Turok, the fucking Native American soy boy who magically discovered dinosaurs and shotguns, and for some weird reason people have a boner over it. I'm not big on Turok at all, I actually fucking hate that game, and my next one is Turok 2, and I don't look forward to that one at all. To me, I feel that Turok is less of a first-person shooter and more of a fucking prehistoric walking simulator sponsored by Ambien. It's not for me. That being said, there is an oddball on the Nintendo 64, and that is Turok Rage Wars, which is a strange game, and the reason I say that is because it's mostly local multiplayer. There is a single-player trial, but the only reason you would want to do that is to unlock characters for the multiplayer, so yeah. This game was released in 1999 and it had a black cart, but the rarer one is a gray cart with a ROM code of NUS NRWE-1, and it was made in response to a bug, specifically a bug in the frag tag mode. It was kind of like what THQ did for WWF No Mercy with the -1 revision that I mentioned in the previous episode, which if you haven't checked out, I'll go ahead and link it down below and at the end of this episode. The gray cart for Turok Rage Wars is a hefty thing to buy, coming in at around $450 on average. Got another racing game on the list today. This one is F1 Racing Championship, a pretty cool game for the Nintendo 64. A very realistic racing simulator as well. It's a tough one. I checked it out for a sports episode I did, and it almost made the list. I just didn't get the warm and fuzzies that I needed. Now, this game was created by Ubisoft, and at the time, it was a big deal. This was one of the games that managed to snag the elusive FIA license, meaning that they could put all the licensed teams, cars, drivers, and all of the tracks. It was a big deal, but unfortunately, the only NTSC audience to get it was in Brazil. Because it was only released in Brazil and because there are so few copies created, you have a rare game. Loose, this is about $450. Complete in box is about $2,000, so if you really wanted to get this game, just buy it loose or learn Portuguese, or do both, might help you out a little bit. There was a point in time where John Romero's name made you scream for joy, you know what I mean? The guy was untouchable in the game world. His endeavors kind of shot off the boomer shooter genre and caused it to have an identity. One part of the cog had the core 4 for id Software alongside Tom Hall, as well as John and Adrian Carmack. But John didn't stay at id Software for long. In fact, John left id Software to form Ion Storm with Tom Hall and didn't really kick off much. In fact, to me, the only game that mattered was Deus Ex, maybe Thief if you were into that level of monotony. But there was a game that had an interesting marketing campaign, and that game was Daikatana, where Mr. Romero claimed he would make you his bitch and to, quote, suck it down. Well, consumers did suck it down, but the frame rate sucked even more. A demo for this ran at a solid, whopping 12 frames per second, and it's known to be incredibly shit, only really selling 175,000 copies on the Nintendo 64. So what happens when you have a low sale count? Games become rare. And this one, in particular, Loose, isn't that bad, but if you want it CIB, you're looking at about $750, which is not worth it at all to me. Mario Party was so much fun as a kid. I played the hell out of it. So much that I put a hole in my hand spinning the joystick that my grandmother, a devout Catholic, thought I had the stigmata. It was a very awkward moment of my life that I cherish every single day. Now, in a previous episode, we talked about how Mario Party 2, not for resale, was expensive. And it is. But Mario Party 1's not for resale is even more expensive. And what's so interesting is that it's really hard to tell if the game is a not for resale version because it's isolated to a sticker on the back. Aesthetically, it looks no different from the original run of Mario Party, so there's a really good chance if you buy this, it might be a fake. So if you want to crank out $470 for wishful thinking, good luck. If you do find it, you want to make sure that the sticker says the correct text, that it doesn't look like it will come off, and that it has the store name and the store number. Happy hunting. This game made me so happy. There was a time where Pokemon was really kicking ass, and if you owned a Game Boy, that was the game to have. You had your blue kids, you had your red kids, and then you had your yellow kids. But for me, I had red for like a week before I let a neighbor borrow it, and I never saw it again. So my method of intaking quality Pokemon games was through the Nintendo 64. I loved Pokemon Stadium 1 and 2, and I really liked Pokemon Snap. One of the cooler things you could do, and this was a big deal for kids my age at the time, was to bring your memory card to a Blockbuster or EB Games and print out the pictures you took. Was it cringe? Absolutely. Did we care? Not one fucking bit. Girls had those pictures they would take inside the photo booths. Men had Pokemon Snap printouts. You'd go over to your friend's house and you'd see the picture of the Mewtwo outline from the caves, and that paved the way to rumors, and that's what it was like gaming during that era, just schoolyard conversations and lies on the internet. It was a great time. Now, there are two more releases of this game, one that I won't mention right now, but the middle one is the gray not for resale version. This one was everywhere, especially if there was a photo kiosk, and that resale version goes for about $480. I honestly think having the normal one is perfectly fine, so I don't think it's worth that much. This is my favorite game on the Nintendo 64, and I don't feel that anything can change that. I'd argue this is one of my favorite games of all time because it molded me into who I am now. It was the first game to challenge me, to frustrate me, and to give me a release when I accomplished something. If I recall, it was also the first game I ever truly beat. That's a big deal. I own the original copy, and I also own the Japanese version, and just to round it off, I do have the collector's edition as well. But the one version of this game that'll cost you a lot of money is the not-for-resale version, roughly close to $500. I know I've inundated this list with not-for-resales, and I know it's going to cause some issues, and I'm expecting the worst in the comments below, but I do feel that with more modern games, or at least the transition from rare games to modern ones, that we do need to talk about these. They do exist. They're not going anywhere. WWF, that's a company that had a huge presence in retro video gaming, and I do mean huge, dating all the way back to the earliest DOS games. I knew of them on the NES, and guess what? I hate them. But then there was this sweet spot for these games in the late 90s and early 2000s once the jump to 3D happened. Now these games aren't the best, but they certainly met the expectations of consumers, which is better than what could be said for like 90% of the games prior. On the Nintendo 64, No Mercy was the golden standard, but there was also Attitude, WrestleMania 2000, and Warzone, with Warzone's not for resale being the more expensive one out of the others. Much like Mario Party NFR, this is one of those games that have a sticker on the back, and that would be the only way you would know. It costs about $500. No thank you. At least we get to end our list today with something that isn't here by technicality and is more so due to horrible sales figures, and that is Super Bowling. Now, if you owned a Super Nintendo, you might recognize this. It was created by Kid, the same company who did Burai Fighter, Low G-Man, as well as the 2 G.I. Joe games on the NES. Oh yeah, Pepsi Man too. More you know. But Super Bowling on the Nintendo 64 is a 1-to-1 3D remake of the Super Nintendo game, and to be honest, if it wasn't released so late in the Nintendo 64's lifespan, I think it could have been a decent game, probably much better than Milo's Astro Lanes. But the issue is, this is an expensive game. Loose, it's about $520, so it's right on the cusp of what I would consider Holy Grail rare. Again, it's 100% up to you if you want to buy something like this, but to me, it truly isn't worth it. But what do I know? I'm just a boy. And that's it for today's list. What did you think about it? Are there any games on the list that you own? Or maybe ones that you want to own? I'd be curious to hear about it, and I'm sure the rest of the community would as well. I do respond to every single comment, even the mean ones. Speaking of our community, if you made it to the end of this episode, you're already home with us. We're a gathering of retro gaming enthusiasts that love to remember a time when life was just a little bit easier to live, and if you align with that, then you'll fit right in. Finally, the single most important thing you could do for me is hit that thumbs up button, as it directly impacts the visibility of the videos and the projects that I work on every single day. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes. Fortefyre out.